Hi, this is Kristen. I'm here to present my oral lesson plan for Alea pertaining to raspberry roll making. So this is how it's going to be going. So we're first going to introduce ourselves, and this will eliminate state and trait anxiety to get a little bit comfortable with each other, and then individual physical state will make it a little bit more comfortable and she'll know me and she'll know who I am, and then we can get to know each other like that. But it may also cause debilitating anxiety because it's never really met me before, and we don't really know each other that much. But that will change, and this will cause the temporal lobe to be used in hearing my name. So she'll be able to record that in her memory and her auditory. And then for our second step, I'll be playing some music, not too loud, not to distract us too much, but a little bit low, just to eliminate the state and trait anxiety again, and to put up the physical climate, and to encourage positive self-esteem, just to make it a little bit more comfortable, and to present a safe atmosphere, which will go into Maslow's second level hierarchy of needs. And then the thalamus will be working to stay awake and alert, just to give her that energy and boost. And then I'm then going to introduce the setting which we will be working, which will be the kitchen. And this will also eliminate state anxiety because she'll know where she is, she'll see her surroundings, and then we'll also lay out the physical arrangements, such as the stove, the counters, the fridge, just things around her that we'll be using. And we'll also individual physical state, which will be herself. She'll know where she is, she'll know what's around her. And this will be using the temporal lobe and used to introduce the environment. And the occipital lobe as well, because she's seen all of this. She'll see what's around her, and will be used to take in the surroundings. And then I'll be asking her a little pre-assessment question, such as, have you ever baked before? And this will, like I said, be a pre-assessment, and this will use the neocortex, which will be used for conscious thought and language, because she'll be able to understand what I'm saying and able to process those words. And she'll be able to use that herself to answer those questions with her own language. And the temporal lobe is also used in hearing the question and answering. And then I'll also ask her, do you know the difference between baking and cooking? And this will cause also a pre-assessment, and will lay out any misconceptions that she has to the differences between those two. And this may or may not, when I explain to her the differences, may cause maybe a failure to store. We'll have to see at the end during our assessment. And then this will also, I'll be able to hear her own personal theory of how they differ. And I'll be able to refer to that and able to use what her understanding is. And then I will be then introducing what we'll be making, which will be the raspberry rolls. And then I'm going to introduce a visualization, just an example of what we'll be making. So I'll have a pre-made raspberry roll for her. And I'll have her look at it and study it a little bit. And she'll be using her neocortex again to understand, and I'll be able to hear any problems that she may have. And then we will be, I'll be able to hear any undergeneralizations that I'll have for her, and I'll be able to fix that hopefully. And then I'll introduce also the prototype, which is the cinnamon roll. And this will be a positive instance of what we'll be wanting. And this will also be a visualization, like I said before. And then I'll be introducing the tools that will be used, such as cups, teaspoons, pinches, not like pinching, but like little dashes of things I'll be using, whisk, mixing spoons, rolling pin, knives, and she'll hopefully be introduced this before, so this will be a zone of proximal development, so she'll know probably what these are and how to use them. And this also, with all this different information or these different tools, may also cause a failure to store again. And then I'll be introducing safety regulations involving cutting, cleanliness, and the oven. And if we're not safe, this may cause us to get hurt. And this will also introduce or like set also the physical arrangement of how things are going to be going and how we want to be safe. And this will also be a positive and negative instance, because if we're not safe, we'll get hurt. And may cause debilitating anxiety. She'll be like, oh, what are all these things I have to know? So they may cause that. And the thalamus will be in activity with the alertness and safety regulations, like, oh, I need to know this. And then I'll be introducing the subject, which is the raspberry rolls, and this may call overgeneralization, because what is a roll? Rolls can be a lot of different things. And then I'll try to clear that up for her. And then I'll be introducing the ingredients. Will be a direct instruction, like what we will be using. And then I will introduce the recipe, like and then I'll ask her, how are we going to read it? How do we go out of order? This will be a positive, negative instance as well. And this will be experimental research. See, like, oh, do we do this first, and then this, and then that? And then, so I'll be a zone for proximal development. Hopefully she'll know how to read, at least a little bit. If not, I will help her, but not for self-helplessness. I won't cause that, hopefully. And then beginning of the recipe will be a positive instance. I'll be organizing ingredients parts. Well, we'll both be doing that by reading the instructions or recipe. And then I'll introduce her to how to measure ingredients and ask what tools we should be using, such as cups, tablespoons, teaspoons, and these are defining features to cooking, and will make it a lot easier to make sure our measurements are exact, or as exact as they can be. This will be also a transfer of knowledge, so she has these things in front of her, and when we start making these things, we'll be able to use what we have, such as the cups and teaspoons and tablespoons, and able to use that in our cooking. And then the occipital lobe will be also in action again. We'll be used to take in all the tools that we'll be needing to use, and this may also cause disequilibrium. She'll be like, oh, there's so much to do. She'll be probably a little bit confused, but I'll try to make sure her state and trait anxiety is low, so because I'll let her know that I'm there for her, and that'll help her out. And then we'll begin the dough recipe using a large bowl, and the large bowl may be a overgeneralization. And then the students will be taking the reins with my guiding instruction and making the dough. And this will be hopefully in her zone of proximal development. She'll know how to measure or how to dump things into the measuring cups. And this will be a positive, and I'll give her positive reinforcements throughout this so she doesn't feel like she's doing anything wrong, because it is all, we're all learning here. And then she may or may not have an imaginary audience where she'll feel like, oh, while I'm measuring, people are looking at me and everything like that. And then the neocortex will also be in play again, used to focus on the recipe instruction and accurate ingredient measurements. And then the brainstem will be used to put all of that into action by processing and giving all of that messages to the brain and to the body. And then when the dough is being made, we'll discuss, when it's done being made actually, we'll discuss the need for it to rise, and this may be overgeneralization because I'll introduce yeast, and that may be a little debilitating. She'll be like, what? I don't understand all of that, but I'll try to explain it as simple as possible. And then I'll be asking her before I tell her about the yeast and how it's affecting it. And then I'll ask her how and why is the dough rising, and then I can hear her personal theory of how the dough is rising. And then I'll have the student take charge in making the dough by following the recipe, and the cerebral will be in use by using the frontal lobe, which is used with the motor skills needed because she'll be using her hands. And then this will be also in the psychomotor domain because she's moving around. And the cerebellum is also being used to put forth action and movement, and the parietal lobe will be used when handling the dough because it'll be sticky. She'll be able to feel that because it's a lot of this is on hands. And when the dough is rising, introduce the recipe to the filling. I'll be doing that, and then we'll be using a clean bowl, which I will tell her. This is also with cleanliness. We don't want to use the same bowl by mixing things together because it won't taste as well. And I'll be showing her how to beat the ingredients, and by being a prototype, I'll be her prototype of like, okay, this is how it's supposed to be done. And then the visualization of her trying to whip and use that wrist action to whip the ingredients into shape. And then, let me see. And then I'll give her positive reinforcements for the technique that she's using. And then we're going to prepare the oven, and I'll explain how that works, and we'll go through the process of how to turn it on, what to push to get the right temperature. And this may cause debilitating anxiety, and I'll be cueing her by saying, okay, and then what? And then what button do we push now? And this may cause learning helplessness. She may look at me and be like, okay, what do I do now? But then I'll be using the cueing, and then response on how to the oven starts, and the cognitive domain that will be used to process and understand how to turn on the oven, and positive reinforcements will be given. And the occipital lobe is used to take in how the oven operates. So she'll see which buttons I push, and then she'll hopefully be able to copy that as well. And then we'll talk about when the dough is rising, how to put down cornstarch. When it's done rising, this will be a visualization, hopefully in the zone of proximal development, and may cause overgeneralization for, do we put this down all the time? What do we do with it? And the frontal lobe also being used with the motor movements, and the psychomotor domain also with the motor movements. Imaginary audience may occur again while she's focusing on doing this on her own a little bit, so she may be a little nervous. Also, the brainstem is putting all those connections together, and contagious behavior may happen because I'll be constantly wiping my hands to make sure my hands don't get too sticky and too grimy with all the cornstarch and the stickiness. And the motor cortex will be used when rolling the dough out, and I'll be also a prototype for that, and I'll be able to get her parietal lobe going with the handling and the feeling of the cornstarch with all the texture. And then we'll be doing the filling, which is going to be going inside of the roll. This will also show her how to spread the filling, which will be a visualization and a direct instruction. So I'll be like, okay, this is how I'm doing, now you do it. And then the cerebellum will be used to put forth the action and movement, and the motor cortex will be used to spread the filling. And then when the dough is flat, I'm going to be teaching her how to roll up the dough. And this will be also a prototype, and I'll be cueing her by stepping aside and gesturing my hands to the dough and be like, okay, now it's your turn. And this will hopefully be in her zone of proximal development because she's probably rolled like a sleeping bag or just rolling up towels or something. And this will use her frontal lobe again with the motor skills and the psychomotor domain. The frontal lobe will also be used, and positive reinforcements will be constantly given to make sure that she knows that she's doing it correctly, and the cerebellum will also be used. And then after that, we're going to be cutting the roll into equal pieces. So this will be a direct instruction, and will be involved in the cognitive domain by measuring the size of the cuts, and then positive reinforcements will be given on how she's doing and how that she's doing it correctly, or if not, I will help her. And then cerebellum will also be used to put forth the action to cut, and this will be also, hopefully she'll use recall and be able to understand, oh, I'm handling a knife, I should be safe. And then we're going to prepare the glass dish by greasing the bottom, and I'll explain to why that's important. And I'll show her, okay, now if we don't grease the pan, it will get burned on the bottom, and that will be a positive negative instances, because if we do grease the pan, it won't be burned on the bottom. And then we'll be placing the buns or rolls in the oven, and this will be a positive instance because we're going to be putting it in there. We're going to be getting motioning forward by preparing the oven and baking our rolls. And this will be in the zone of proximal development, so we'll be able to pick it up and put it in there, and also recall with the safety of the oven. And then the visualizations will be used to see that the buns are ready and they've risen a little bit, doubled in size, that they're ready to be baked. And then we're going to place the dish in the oven, and then we're going to let the rolls bake for about 15 to 16 minutes. And we'll be setting the timer, and so that will be a cueing when the bell rings that they're done. And we're going to check frequently as a visualization to see, are they browning yet? Are they not browning? And then it'll be experimental a little bit because we're going to see how, is it browning yet? And that means it's getting done, or if it's not. And then positive reinforcements will be given, and then intuition will also be used because you'll have to figure out on our own, okay, if it's browning, that means it's going to be done. And if it's not, she'll have to be, is the middle done? Now, is the outside only browning, or is the inside being cooked as well in the roll? And then we're going to eliminate, she may have some anxiety being like, oh, I don't want to burn it. I don't want to make sure it's not done all the way, so that may cause a little anxiety. And while the buns are baking, I'm going to be doing some reviewing on a review assessment on how the recipe is followed and what steps we have to take, and what's the difference between cooking and baking, and how we measure ingredients. What do we use? And this may cause facilitating anxiety, may cause her to remember those things that we've been taught. And then cognitive domain will be used to recall and sort the information that she needs to present to me. And this will be accessing long-term memory, hopefully that she's stored and obtained throughout the lesson. And then failure to retrieve may occur because she may not remember certain things that we've discussed at the beginning of our lesson that hasn't been constantly reinforced throughout the lesson. And the Maslow's hierarchy of needs will be involved pertaining to the first level of psychological needs. So we're going to be taking a little break at that time, so she'll be able to get a drink, use the bathroom, whatever she needs. And part of the limbic system will be used in involving the hippocampus, which is used to recall those answers that I'll be using to assess her knowledge of what she's obtained throughout the lesson. And then I'm gonna introduce some variations to how you can make sweet rolls or cinnamon rolls, and that there's different kinds, and this will be an example of correlation features, how they can have similar shades but doesn't mean they'll always taste the same. And then moral development. We're gonna be using, what are we gonna do with all these extra rolls? Are we gonna give them to others? Are we gonna keep them all for ourselves? Or what are we gonna do with them? So this will maybe cause, hopefully, positive self-esteem because she'll be ready. She'll see that her creation came out, hopefully, how we wanted it to. And then positive reinforcements because I'll be like, good job, you did this all by yourself or mostly by yourself. And then imaginary audience may come into play as she decides what she needs to do with all these extra rolls. And we'll be using the affective domain, which will be used to present the feelings of accomplishment and pride in her work, and that she's completed all this. And the use of hot cognition will be used to decide what to do with all these extra rolls. Should I give them to my family? Should I give them to my friends? And that will also use the amygdala, which will create the emotions involving happiness, excitement, pride, and all those happy emotions that she's accomplished. And this is also part of the limbic system, the amygdala. And so throughout all these throughout the lesson, I'll be hopefully giving her good reinforcement and to encourage her happiness, and state anxiety will be lowered. And that's hopefully what will happen. I will probably see a lot more after I review the video that we do together. Thank you and have a wonderful day.